The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The human postponer. They were the master of one phrase. I'll circle back on that. But 3 months later, you were the one doing all their work and wondering how big that circle is. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can take the hiring load off your plate by automating the hiring busy work from the initial job post to scheduling interviews. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hi, welcome back to Unbound. I'm Beth Curry. This is Season 4, Invisible Daughter. Last episode, we talked about the mental load and the emergency contact rule. This is kind of that invisible cognitive labor and the assumption of constant availability. And today I'm going to get into two things that live kind of right alongside both of those things. What I call the emotional janitor, and then there's also the well-known term, the sandwich generation. We're going to talk about that. One is about cleaning up messes, obviously. And the other one is about being pressed from every direction at once. And for a lot of daughters, these two things are happening at the same time. So picture this. It's after a family dinner that ended badly, okay? Someone stormed out. Someone cried. Someone retreated in silence. The cake sits uncut. The celebration that was supposed to happen didn't. Everyone's kind of scattered to their corners, except for you. You're still there, standing in the middle of all of it, surveying the damage and feeling that familiar pull, not so much toward the dishes, but towards the people, toward the hurt feelings and the misunderstandings scattered all around the room. You know what's expected. Call the one who left, text the one who's upset, find a diplomatic way to address what happened without making anyone even more defensive. And then you also want to kind of be the go-between, the people who won't speak directly to each other because of whatever happened. You need to restore the family to something that functions. This is the emotional janitor role, and daughters who hold it are doing something that would cost real money if purchased professionally. It's mediation, it's conflict resolution, it's crisis counseling, it's relationship repair. It's being done for free without being asked, as a matter of course. Right? The emotional janitorial work kind of requires genuinely sophisticated skills as well. You're reading beneath what people are saying to what they actually mean. And you're translating between family members who speak completely different emotional languages. And you are trying, at least, to remain calm and neutral while managing all these intense feelings at the same time. This is professional level work, and it's done by daughters who received no training and have no supervision and work no defined hours and get no recognition when the family's functioning smoothly, because when the work is done well, nobody knows it even happened, right? So I talked to Vera. She's been her family's emotional janitor, she says, for over 20 years, and she traces it back to her parents' volatile marriage, to learning to read the pressure in the household and intervene before things exploded. Vera says, I became really good at sensing when tension was building. I felt the shift in the atmosphere, and I would find ways to redirect it. I'd suggest an activity, like get my mom to help me with homework, or I would change the subject, or I'd make everyone laugh. I was like a little air traffic controller for everyone's emotions. As an adult, Vera's work expanded significantly. She mediates between her now divorced parents around family events. She's helping to manage her mom's anxiety through regular support calls, and she's providing a communication bridge between family members who've stopped speaking directly to each other. She says, I realized I've been doing unpaid family therapy for decades. I have strategies for managing each family's emotional triggers. I know what lights each person up and what sets everyone off. I hold more information about this family's psychology than any of them hold about themselves. Now, I asked her as well how much time she thinks she spends on this, and she thinks it's 10 to 15 hours per week on the family emotional maintenance. Basically a part-time job for a service that would cost hundreds of dollars per hour if purchased professionally. Now, what makes the emotional janitor role particularly hard to recognize? Unlike physical cleaning, emotional cleaning leaves no visible evidence, right? When you mop a floor, you can see that it's cleaner, but when you restore a family relationship after conflict, the repair is invisible. The family simply functions again, and nobody knows why. Successful emotional janitorial work looks like nothing, It looks like a family that somehow gets along. The work that made that possible goes completely unacknowledged because it was invisible by design. I'm going to tell you about someone named Petra. Her story shows what happens when the emotional janitorial load creates a dependency that the family system refuses to kind of look over. So she's in her late 20s. She says she's spent years functioning as what she came to call an unlicensed family therapist. 1 month, she started tracking the actual services she was providing. So she said she was providing crisis support for her mom's anxiety, mediation between her parents about financial decisions, informal counseling about her sister's failing marriage, de-escalation interventions during event planning, and ongoing emotional support across multiple family members. She said, I was providing more support to my family than many people receive from actual professionals. But when I gently suggested that some family members might benefit from working with someone trained for this, they were almost offended. They had me. Why would they want to pay for professional help? Now, this is the critical insight, I think. When daughters provide emotional janitorial services consistently and well, families lose the motivation to build other support systems, right? The daughter's availability kind of becomes this reason not to seek professional help and not to develop personal resilience and not to learn direct communication because they have her, right? And the longer this goes on, the more indispensable the daughter becomes and the harder it is to change, right? Now, I want to talk about the sandwich generation. Traditionally, the term describes middle-aged adults caught between caring for aging parents and supporting their own kids. But what I see and what the stories I've kind of gathered confirm is that daughters are entering this sandwich far earlier than the term ever anticipated. They're not in their 50s. They're in their 20s and 30s. Before careers are established and before financial foundations are solid and before their own partnerships have even had time to find their footing, right? Before they've had a chance to figure out who they actually are. I'm going to share a story that kind of is close to me. I want to tell you about Angela. Angela was a devoted daughter who became the primary caregiver for her mom as her mom's health declined, beginning with strokes that progressed into dementia-related changes. As the eldest child, Angela felt naturally responsible. She also understood practically that if she didn't step up, both her parents at the nursing home would feel the absence. So she stepped up fully. She was visiting daily. She was spending 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, serving as her mom's companion, advocate, coordinator. She was managing medical communication and basically monitoring her mom's emotional state, ensuring her quality of life. And her brother made monthly visits, and he was received like a returning hero. But Angela received something different, just this quiet assumption that this was simply what she did and what she was for, and the cost to Angela was enormous. So over the years of this caregiving, Angela developed a significant reliance on alcohol. It was just a way of managing anxiety that had no other outlet. Her marriage ended in divorce, not entirely because of the caregiving, but the time and energy she spent giving to her parents, the years spent at the nursing home instead of present in her own life, were a meaningful factor. She sacrificed her mental health and her physical health and her marriage and her friendships. I know Angela's story because she's my mother-in-law and her son, my husband, shared it with me. And, I saw some of it early in my relationship with Brian and early in our marriage. And Brian's honesty about what he witnessed is something I want you to hear directly, okay? So he says, when I look back, I see a woman who was trying to keep it all together, but was stretched completely thin. And I see the rest of us, me, my sister, my dad, being incredibly selfish. He described how his mother would express frustration that her brother never stepped up. And she would say things like, well, I've got to go spend time with mom because no one else will. How the emotional outburst started and how she hid so much for so long. She felt obligated, Brian said, and she didn't know how to reduce that obligation without feeling like she was abandoning her mother. I just kind of want to stay with that for a sec. She didn't know how to reduce her obligation without feeling like she was abandoning her mom. This is one of the core traps of the sandwich generation for daughters. They believe that any reduction in care is abandonment and that stepping back even slightly is some sort of moral failure, and that the only acceptable level of involvement is total. I think that belief, combined with a family system that doesn't challenge it and a brother who gets celebrated for just showing up occasionally, is what keeps daughters locked in caregiving patterns long past what is sustainable. Angela's story didn't have to end the way that it did. I think that's the hardest and most important thing to say. The care her mom needed was real, and the love Angela had for her mom was real, and neither of those things required Angela to destroy herself. Professional care services exist, and rotation systems among family members are possible. I've asked a few times if family members might want to go into a rotation with me, but I haven't really been met favorably yet. We'll see. Setting a sustainable number of hours per week rather than an open-ended commitment is allowed. You want to utilize the nursing home staff for what nursing home staff are trained to do, right? They get to walk away. You don't want to supplement that care with 6 hours of daughter presence every day. You're allowed to just leave it on them and let them do their jobs. This is what they're getting paid to do, and you're not. You're not failing. Took me a while to learn this myself. None of those alternatives, though, get explored when the family system has already determined, without discussing it, that the daughter will handle it. And when the daughter herself believes that any reduction in her presence is a moral failure, I don't know. The path towards sustainability kind of begins with naming what is happening, right? Understanding that devoted care and destroyed care are not the same thing, and recognizing that a daughter who's healthy and boundaried and resourced can provide better long-term care support than one who is depleted and disappearing. We can love our families deeply. We can show up meaningfully. We can be present through their hardest seasons, and we can do all of that without handing over our entire lives. And I do want to point out, and I may say this again later in the season, Brian decided, after watching what happened with his mom, that the cycle was going to stop with him. And the way that he has stepped up for me and helping with my mom's care, not just because he's POA, but because he wants a cycle to stop and he doesn't want to see an invisible daughter bearing the entire load. He's great. If I'm away or I can't go see my mom or anything like that, he'll go visit her. He comes with me when I visit her. Crew is the same. He goes for any and all visits if possible. He loves his Nana. He loves his mom. I'm very supported by my husband and my son. Boys get the easy road usually, when there's an invisible daughter, but these two men are learning that this has to stop. The cycle has to stop, right? On Thursday, I'm going to get into the heart of why change is so hard. The impossible choices daughters face when their own dreams collide with family duty and the system running underneath all of it, if that makes choosing yourself feel like a moral failure. I think I said on Thursday. I don't know for sure it's going to be Thursday. I don't know where we're at with the schedule. Next episode, let's just say that. If you've ever made a major life decision based primarily on not wanting to disappoint someone, that episode's going to feel familiar. And I'm going to leave you with this question. Who in your family system is being celebrated for doing the bare minimum while you're simply expected to do everything? I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.